You can spend an entire day around people talking, functioning, showing up, and still feel like the real you never entered the room. Not because you were faking, not because you don't care, but because something in you only comes fully online when the noise stops and you're finally by yourself. The door closes, the house goes quiet, and there it is. That exhale, that settling, that slow return to someone you recognize. You've felt this for years, this gap between who you are around people and who you are in silence. Other people seem to feel like themselves everywhere, at work, at dinner, in a crowd. You don't. You feel most like yourself in the car, alone. In the early morning before anyone wakes up. Late at night, when no one needs anything from you. The world calls this introversion, shyness, avoidance. But those words don't reach it. Because this isn't about disliking people. This is about how your sense of self works differently depending on whether anyone else is in the room. There are 6 psychological signs underneath this pattern. And once you understand them, solitude stops feeling like a flaw and starts feeling like the most honest part of your life. Sign 1. Your identity is environmentally sensitive. Around certain people, you become slightly louder. Around others, quieter. Around some, funnier. Around others, more careful, more measured. You don't choose this, it just happens. You walk into a room and something in you reads the environment and adjusts automatically, silently, before you've finished your first sentence. And afterward, alone again, you notice the shift. You realize you were different in there, that you offered a version of yourself shaped to fit the people around you. And the unsettling question returns: which version is actually you? The one at work? The one with your family? The one with your closest friend? Or the one that exists at 11 at night when everyone is asleep and no one is asking anything of you? Psychology calls this contextual identity fluidity. Your sense of self modulates depending on the social environment. This isn't the same as being fake. It's more like being highly responsive. Your system reads social signals and adjusts not because you're dishonest, but because somewhere early, adjusting is what worked. Flexibility was rewarded. Rigidity had consequences. So your self became fluid, not because it wanted to, but because that was safer than staying fixed. The problem is simple. When you're alone, there's no one to adjust to, no signal to read, no room to accommodate. The self stops shifting and settles into its resting shape. That's why being alone feels like returning. It's the only place where you're not calibrating yourself to fit someone else's frequency. You might not fully trust your own identity in social settings. You might wonder if the version you just offered was honest or just well-fitted. But this sensitivity isn't a defect. It's evidence of how precisely your system reads rooms. That precision just needs somewhere to rest. And once your identity becomes fluid around others, something else starts happening. You begin performing without meaning to. Sign 2. You've been performing so long, you forgot it was a performance. You smile when smiling is expected. You match the emotional temperature of the room without thinking about it. Lighter when people want lightness, serious when the conversation shifts. None of this is fake, exactly, but it's managed, edited. And the exhausting part isn't the management itself, it's that you can feel it happening in real time. You're in the conversation, and watching yourself be in the conversation simultaneously. 2 versions running at once. One engaging, one observing. Nobody taught you this. The performance built itself through thousands of small social moments where you received feedback about what was welcomed and what wasn't. A look of discomfort when you were too direct. Warmth when you softened. Your system compiled all of it into an automatic protocol. Manage first, express second. Now that protocol runs every time another person enters the room. You don't activate it, it activates itself. This is why solitude feels like relief. Alone, the protocol shuts off. You don't have to manage your face, your tone, your energy, your opinions. The mental overhead drops to 0. And what remains, the unmanaged, unedited version, feels like the most honest thing you've experienced all day. The longer this runs, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between managed you and actual you. You start wondering if there even is a version underneath the adjusting. There is. It's the one that shows up in solitude. It's been there the whole time, consistent, waiting, honest. It just rarely gets permission to exist around other people. Because permission was never part of the arrangement. The arrangement was always perform first, exist later. And your nervous system knows the difference, even when your mind doesn't. Which brings us to the third sign, one that lives not in your mind, but in your body. Sign 3. Your nervous system only rests when you're alone. This one isn't psychological, it's physical. Around people, even safe people, even people you love, your body holds a subtle tension you may not notice while it's happening. Jaw slightly tighter, shoulders slightly raised, breathing slightly shallower. Something in your posture held just a little too carefully, a little too long. You might even think you're relaxed, that this conversation is easy, that you're enjoying yourself. But you feel the truth when it stops. When you're finally alone, your body releases something it was carrying the entire time, and that release feels like deflation, like something held taut for hours suddenly going soft. Like your skeleton settling into a shape it only takes when no one is watching. You might not even realize how much tension you were holding until the moment it leaves, and then it's obvious. It was there the whole time, running in the background, costing you something real. Psychology connects this to nervous system hypervigilance. Often it develops in early environments where social situations required constant scanning, reading moods, anticipating shifts, staying alert. Your body learned to treat people in the room as a condition requiring readiness, not danger, just quiet, sustained, invisible readiness. And readiness, even at low volume, is expensive. It depletes you the same way stress does. When you're alone and the scanning stops, your nervous system finally shifts out of monitor mode into rest. That's why solitude can feel almost narcotic sometimes. Not because you're avoiding life, because your body is finally doing what it couldn't do while anyone else was present. You can't override a nervous system response with willpower. You can only give it what it needs. And what yours needs is periodic quiet, not as escape, but as maintenance. If this is making sense to you right now, if you're hearing your own experience described in a way nobody has described it before, this channel has a lot more of that. Consider subscribing. Every video here is made for people who process life at a depth that most people never see. And while your nervous system recovers in silence, something else happens too, something most people never realize. Sign 4. Your inner world needs silence to function. Alone, your thoughts move differently. Slower, more honestly, more layered. Ideas that were invisible during the day suddenly surface. Feelings you didn't know you were carrying become clear. Memories connect to other memories. Creative threads you lost in conversation reappear out of nowhere. Like an entire ecosystem inside you that only comes online when the external noise drops low enough. Most people don't understand this about quiet, interior people. Social interaction requires focused, outward attention. That focus narrows your internal bandwidth. Your inner world doesn't disappear around people, it goes to low power. The longer you spend in social mode, the longer it stays compressed. And the longer it stays compressed, the more something essential about you feels missing. That's why solitude feels productive, even when you're doing nothing. You might sit in silence for an hour and look, from the outside, like you're staring at a wall. But your mind is doing its most important work, processing, connecting, understanding things that couldn't be understood while someone else was in the room. You know the feeling. You drive home from an event, and by the third mile, you're deeper in thought than you were all evening. You lie in bed and suddenly feel something real, a realization, an emotion that was invisible 2 hours ago when you were surrounded by people. You might even feel a strange sadness arrive that has no obvious source until you realize it was there the whole time, just waiting for quiet so it could surface. That isn't random. It's your inner world, reopening the moment conditions allow it. People around you see you choosing solitude, and they worry. They think you're isolating. They don't realize that what looks like withdrawal is the opposite, you finally engaging with yourself at the depth your mind was built for. The socializing was the restriction. The silence is the expansion. And if all of this sounds familiar, the fifth sign goes even deeper, all the way back to the beginning. Sign 5. You were probably never fully mirrored. This is the one underneath everything else. In early development, children need their emotional reality reflected back to them. Seen, acknowledged, received. When a child expresses something real and the caregiver responds with attunement, the child absorbs a foundational message. What I feel is real. Who I am is acceptable. When that mirroring is absent or inconsistent or conditional, the child absorbs something different, not always in words, sometimes in silences. In the way certain emotions were welcomed and others ignored. In the subtle withdrawal of warmth when the child was too much, too honest, too needy. The message becomes, who I am in full may not be safe to show, not dangerous, just not entirely welcome. Not met with the recognition that tells a child their inner world is valid. And what that creates, over years, is a self that feels most real in private. A quiet belief that the full version of you is something to be managed around others, not expressed. An internal split, the public self that functions and adapts, and the private self that holds everything honest and unshown. That split doesn't feel dramatic, it feels normal, because it's all you've ever known. Solitude became the only place where the full self could exist without consequences. No editing, no managing, no wondering whether this version is acceptable. Over time, being alone didn't just feel comfortable, it became the only place where you're entirely honest. You didn't withdraw from the world because you couldn't handle it. You withdrew into yourself because the world didn't make enough room for all of you. That private room you built in silence was never a retreat. It was a refuge, and it kept the most honest part of you alive when nothing else would. Sign 6. You process your emotions alone because no one ever made space for them. This one often goes unnoticed, even by the person living it. When something hurts you, when something moves you, when something confuses you emotionally, you don't bring it to anyone. You take it inside. You sit with it alone. You work through it privately, in your own time, in your own silence. Not because you're secretive, because that's how it's always worked. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your emotions were yours to handle. Maybe you expressed something as a child and it was dismissed. Maybe you cried and were told to stop. Maybe you shared something vulnerable and the room went awkward. Maybe nobody did anything wrong, they just weren't available in the way you needed. And your system learned, process this yourself. Don't bring it to the room won't hold it. So, you built an internal processing system. Strong, private, self-contained. You became someone who could feel deeply and handle it alone. Someone who didn't need to be talked through their feelings. Someone who could carry emotional weight without putting it on anyone else. And that system works. It's kept you functional for years. But it comes with a cost most people never name. Emotional loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around. The loneliness of having people around and still processing everything alone. Of being in a relationship, a family, a friendship, and still carrying your heaviest feelings into a room by yourself, because that's the only place they've ever been fully felt. You might love the people in your life deeply, and they might love you. But there's a layer of your emotional experience that has never been shared, not because you don't want to, but because sharing it feels like a language you never learned. You know how to carry. You never learned how to hand it over. Solitude doesn't just feel like home because it's peaceful. It feels like home because it's the only place your emotions have ever been given their full weight. The only place where sadness gets to be sadness without being managed or minimized. Where confusion gets to stay confused until you're ready. Where grief gets to exist without someone telling you to move on. That is not dysfunction. That is someone who built an entire emotional world inside themselves because the outside world never quite made room for it. And if this video is reaching something in you that rarely gets reached, if these 6 signs feel more like a mirror than a list, you belong here, This channel exists for people who carry more than they show and feel more than they say. Subscribe. There's more here that was made specifically for the way your mind works. So if you only feel like yourself when you're alone, now you know what's underneath it. This was never about being antisocial or broken or incapable of connection. This was about a self that learned to protect its most real parts and found that the only reliable place to be honest was in its own company. That protection worked. It kept you intact. The question now isn't, why do I need so much time alone? You already know that answer. The question is, what would it take to feel this real with someone else in the room? Not everyone, not everywhere. Maybe one person, one conversation, one room where the performance isn't required and the full self can arrive without editing itself on the way in. You were never hiding from the world. You were keeping something real alive in the only place that felt safe enough to hold it. That is not a flaw to be corrected. That is loyalty to yourself, practiced quietly, for longer than anyone knows.